Hello and welcome to Get a Better Handle on Life. I'm Barry Winbolt and this is my podcast. And today I'm going to be talking about purpose, or more specifically, finding your purpose. Now, there's a lot out there on the web about this, and it seems to have become a modern obsession or a total preoccupation for some people, particularly younger people. And I'll get into that. So if you want to find out about your purpose and how to find it, you'll get lots of information out there. But I've got a different take on that. And I want to take some of the pressure off you, because I think, well, first of all, we need to know how it is important, why it is important. But I'm going to ask the question, is it important at all? And I'll tell you why. Because it's changed over time, this notion of purpose. And that's my take on the topic today. So what is purpose? Well, purpose gives your life meaning. It's not about happiness. It's not about your job. It's not about what you actually do day by day. It's about what gets you out of bed in the morning. What do you get up for? What do you look forward to? If you wake up in the night, what have you got to look forward to the coming day, the coming week, the coming month? What gives shape, meaning, and, purpose to your life? That's really what it's about, and that's what I'm talking about here. Now, I see and hear a lot of stuff about purpose. There's a bit of history coming up here. My history. I never thought about purpose. I've had a great life. I've had a sense of fulfillment. I've had a lot of opportunities to express myself, and it's all come together really well for me in older age. I never expected to be this age, by the way. We grew up, my generation, in the 50s, 60s, and a little bit in the 70s. In the 1970s, mid-1970s, I was just getting into my 30s, to give you an idea. I had a family, 2 children, a wife, 2 children. That was my family. That was the unit. We were very happy. We were doing what youngish people did then, starting a family, starting a business. I wouldn't have said at that time, if you'd have asked me what was my purpose, I wouldn't really have known, I don't think, because people didn't talk about it in those days. It was it was a realm of philosophers and ideas people and thinkers. And I think if we talked about purpose back in those days, we probably were talking about what we did. And what we were getting up for every day was to earn a living, put a crust on the table, feed and house and clothe our families, assuming we had those things, or ourselves, and perhaps maybe a sense of mission came later. I know a lot of people wandered about in the 1960s. A lot of them were addled with drugs and various other stimulants, and they wandered about the world. A lot of people went to India to find themselves. So I guess this quest of making sense of your life has always been there. It's just that the language has changed. And I suppose you could say that the hippie movement, and I was, part of that generation, we weren't actually looking for purpose. But we were looking, some of us, for a sense of meaning. I have to say, I wasn't one of them, actually. I was too busy trying to scratch a living and develop my ideas, because I worked in creative fields in those days. I worked in fashion, and I was very interested in making things and expressing myself through my craft, if you like, and putting that stuff out there. Now I do that through words, through ideas, through developing ideas, and I have very much more of a sense of mission, or yes, purpose in my life, if that's what you want to call it. So that's me, and that was my generation. What I've noticed in the past few years, let me say, and by the way, just in case you don't know me, I'm a psychologist, I'm a therapist, a coach, if you like. I help people get a better handle on their life. That's the name of the podcast, and that's what I do. I help people find their way, make some sense, get a better sense of themselves, solve a problem. Whatever it happens to be, it's about improving some aspect of themselves or their lives. It could be that they need to sort out a relationship that's not functioning well. Now, I've done a lot of that, particularly in the workplace. It may be that they have an ongoing conflict. I've done a lot of that too, helping people to find ways through the conflicts. Whatever it is that troubles people, that's what I have been doing. And if you want, by the way, more ideas of this type, then subscribe to my podcast. You'll also find me on YouTube. You'll also find me on LinkedIn. That's enough of the commercial break. So that's what I do. And this podcast is part of that. And I guess my purpose, if you ask me, is to spread the word. In fact, I don't guess, I know. It's to reach as many people as possible with my ideas, because I've built these ideas over 30 years in my public speaking, in my seminars, webinars, training events, and all the other stuff I've done. Now, I'm not making this a plug for myself, although it may sound like it. What I'm actually illustrating is that it's taken me probably from my mid-30s to now, that's around 40 years, to really get a clear sense of my purpose. So when, just before 2020, I first became aware of this wave of demand, this pressure a lot of younger people were feeling about finding their purpose. And where it really showed up was during lockdown, because I was taking questions over the web constantly, daily, about all sorts of things that were troubling people. But in particular, this question of purpose came up regularly, and it surprised me. And then one of my clients started to tell me that it was a very, very worrying thing for him, that he didn't know what his purpose was. And to be honest, I kind of dismissed it. I almost poo-pooed it, and I treated it fairly lightly. But when I'd finished that session with him, I got to thinking about it, and I thought, well, I may not think it's a serious question, but he clearly does. So I felt I hadn't done my best by him. So I sent him an email just acknowledging that and apologizing. And then I wrote a post on it and sent it to him and said, do you think this sums up what you are trying to express when you talk about purpose? And he gave it a thumbs up. He said, yes, it definitely does. So that went out on my blog as a post. So that's really where I'm coming from in this. And we're about what? We're about 8-9 minutes into this podcast. And I've kind of summed up where I am in this. And I've come clean about the fact that I haven't always treated it as seriously as it has become for many people. And it does seem to be, the questions I've had anyway, are from people, say, mostly in their 20s or just below, people under 30, occasionally people a little bit older. I'm Barry Winwell, and you're listening to Get a Better Handle on Life. If you're finding this podcast interesting, please support me by sharing this with someone you know, or by following me on any of the usual platforms. Thank you. So what are we talking about? What am I talking about when I talk about purpose? Well, as I said, it's a thing that gets you out in the morning. It's a sense of mission. It's not your job. It's not your family necessarily. It's not any of the material things. It's not having the best house. It's not having a nice car. It's not the trappings. And it certainly isn't a beautifully curated profile on social media, by the way. Purpose is about what's happening inside you. It's about a certainty. It's about a sense of self. It's about a sense of direction in your life. And I maintain that you can't know these necessarily at 20, 25, 30. These are years when you swan about learning stuff, finding out about yourself, finding out about the world. They're designed for you to be uncertain. That's a good time to experiment, to try things out, within reason, of course. Always read the tin properly and don't do stuff that damages yourself. Too late for some people, I know. But seriously, being in your 20s is not a time to worry about purpose, I don't think. Of course, we all have to earn a living. We all have to find our way in the world. We need a roof over our head and these things. But purpose is much deeper than those material things, because life or somebody else can take those things away from you. And if they get taken away and your purpose goes with them, well, that's even a double whammy. It's more than a double whammy. You don't lose purpose because you lose your house or you lose your job or you lose your career prospects or even you lose your health. You don't lose your purpose. And in this podcast and elsewhere, I speak to a lot of people who are in dire situations in life. And if anything, those crises help to ratify their purpose, help to qualify their sense of purpose and make them more driven and more motivated. And that has been my experience as well, going through trauma in my life, like sudden bereavement, loss of people I love, and other situations, a serious road accident. All of these have been crossroad points in my life. Now, I'm not wishing those things on anyone else, but I'm saying that they are learning points. So finding your purpose is really about curiosity about yourself and what gives you personally a sense of value in your life, a sense of meaning in your life for you. And it is entirely idiosyncratic. It is entirely down to you and about you. It's not what everybody else is doing. It may be that everybody in your year at school or university or in your peer group is doing things one way. But maybe you choose to do it another way. Maybe you choose to go down your own path. Maybe you choose to decide that actually I don't need to make up my mind about my purpose yet. I'm going to wait for it to evolve. And I read a survey recently where it said that 75% of people in America, now I guess this reflects developed societies in most countries, 75% of people have no purpose. Only 25% know what their purpose is. And I would break that down still further, because I think those that claim to know what their purpose is may well not actually know what their purpose is, but they get a sense of purpose from doing the job or earning a living or putting more money in the bank or any of those things. So I've talked about wondering about what purpose is in my case and in the case of my generation. I've talked about later on in our history, more recently, in the last 10, 12 years or so, I have become gradually aware of a shift in the way people think about meaning and these things. And that's expressed itself even more recently as this quest or this search for purpose. And that's led to a proliferation of podcasts, blogs, YouTube videos, and so forth, with people dishing out advice. And some of it is really good. Some of it isn't. Some of it is just plain stupid. I was watching a video the other day in the run-up to this. I've been thinking about this for some time, and the video stated quite clearly, let me have a look, what did it say? If you haven't got your purpose, you can't get on with life. I mean, it was really dramatically presented, and it's feeding this idea that, oh, I haven't got purpose, what am I going to do with my life? Well, purpose comes out, a sense of purpose comes out of living and experiencing and experimenting and being curious. It doesn't come out of going and getting a qualification or putting the diploma on the wall or finding the right job. Those things are very confusing for people, I know, because we live in a very materialistic society, or societies, and we tend to confuse material wealth with well-being, with success, and all of those things. But we have an inner life, and that's what I'm going to be talking about next. You're listening to Get a Better Handle on Life with me, Barry Winbolt. So what do I mean by inner life? Well, think about it. You have your physical, visual, outer life. This is what people see in you. This is what you choose to show to other people. We always keep a part hidden, obviously. This is what you hope others think of you. This is the outside us. This is the outer life. This is how we show up. This is how we present ourselves in situations. Now, there's a lot to be said about doing work on that. That's what personal growth is all about. That's what personal development is all about. Same thing, really. Development is the act of developing yourself, and personal growth should arise from that. And personal growth is far more about what happens inside, and that is thinking about what are your values. Do you know your top 5 values? And by the way, if you don't know your top 5 values, there is a survey online called the VIA Character Strengths Inventory, and I'll put a link in the description of this episode. But you can just Google VIA Character Strengths or something like that, and you'll come up with it. Now, most people share common values. Every culture, every country, every person in the world, pretty much, every family member at least, wants the best for the children. They want to live in material comfort. They want shelter. So let's take those things as read, that there are certain values around achieving those things and being driven to do those things. But what is the next sort of echelon of values? Do you value creativity? Is creativity one of your top values? Maybe you value autonomy. Maybe you value the ability to help others, compassion. Then that's important too. Now, think about these things. If you don't know what they are, how are you going to get a job, say, that is in line, congruent with your values? If you are a creative person and you're going to do a drone-like job where you're not allowed to express your creativity, that may be all right for a time. Say when you're young, we all have to earn a living. But your longer objective, in other words, leading towards your sense of purpose, should be something that is going to satisfy the need to live according to that value. If you're a very honest person and you're in a job that requires you to not exactly lie, but maybe twist the facts a bit to sell a product, it's not going to satisfy you long term. Now, you might get through life very well like that, but will you be fulfilled? Will you have a sense of purpose? Will your values and beliefs be congruent with your lifestyle? So these are questions to think about in yourself way before you get to forming any fixed opinion about what your purpose is. So our sense of meaning tends to be linked to aspects of us that are philosophical or existential. Now, don't be put off by those words, but they're really about us in the deeper sense, our inner life, as I call it, our spiritual life even. And by the way, don't be put off by that word either. Spiritual doesn't mean religious. It means what is going on inside us in the ways that I've talked about. What are our notions about ourselves, how we want to grow, how we want to develop in life, and where ultimately we think we're going. Now, I'll use my own example. I said early on that I never thought I'd get to this age, and I certainly never had a sense of purpose consciously, but I was driven by a purpose which was based on my values. It took me a long time to kind of align those things. For example, when I left school, I knew I could be a writer, and I always wanted to be a writer, but I didn't dare be a writer till I was certainly in my early 40s. That's when I wrote my first book. Now, I tinkered around with writing, but I didn't dare admit it to anybody. I didn't feel brave enough about it because I didn't own it. I didn't feel really that I was enough of a person to be a writer because I had a weird idea about writers being special or something. I now know it's a pretty turgid existence, and actually it takes a lot of discipline to write well. And I'm not saying I'm one of those. I write non-fiction books. I don't write, for example, books on philosophy or books on or novels, which I think is a whole different skill set. So I'm not holding myself out as some example. I'm just using that as an example of an unrealized ambition. I didn't even make a move towards it consciously. However, unconsciously, because that was an underlying aspect of my person, of me, was that I wound up in jobs that gave me good opportunities to learn to write well. And that was not conscious. That was not a conscious decision. I was driven by other things. I was driven by a skill set that I had in a particular industry, which, as I said, happened to be fashion and manufacturing of clothes. And that took me into parallel things. I wrote for magazines and so forth and that sort of thing. So writing was a big part of my life. My underlying ambition was a right to be a writer, but I never dared own up to it. And I actually didn't seriously believe at that age that I would become one. But unconsciously, I was driven in that direction. So what am I saying? I'm saying that if you know what your values are and what you actually hope to fulfill at some point in your life, if you live long enough, whatever that might be, then you start to form an idea based around your values and what's important to you and allow the sense of purpose to arise. Don't get hung up on the sense of purpose. As I say, it's become, it seems to me, a modern obsession, and particularly so in younger people. Now, you might argue with me, you might say purpose is very important, and of course it's different from all of us. You might listen to another speaker who says, yeah, you can't do anything without a sense of purpose. You can't even get out of bed in the morning. Well, I disagree with that, of course, because plenty of people without a sense, as we've heard, 75% of people in one survey have no sense of purpose, but they all manage to get out of bed in the morning. So it's not a requirement to have a sense of purpose to live a good life. That's the first thing. It's not a requirement to have a sense of purpose to feel good about yourself. That's another thing. But if you do have a sense of purpose, it will be something which is fulfilling to you personally. It was something that gives you enthusiasm and passion and even joy. Dare I say passion? It gets overused, doesn't it? But there you go, it's crept in again. And it's something which is benefiting people other than yourself. You may be helping the community. You might just be a very kind and compassionate person helping individuals. You may work in a career or profession that actually is vocational in, I don't know, the church or health or psychology even. So these are the ideas that underpin a sense of purpose. That is, gives you a sense of fulfillment. You enjoy doing it. It benefits the community. It enables you to grow in some way. You see, purpose isn't a destination. Purpose is something that carries you along. And by the way, it doesn't mean that life will necessarily be easy. Having a sense of purpose, knowing about yourself, knowing about your values, knowing what you love doing, knowing what fulfills you. And by the way, you only find these things out by trying and experiencing. This is why in your 20s it's probably too early to talk about purpose. You can talk about your purpose at that time. I was speaking to somebody called Terry Tucker recently. He's on the podcast as well. Fabulous man, an incredibly robust, bright and energized guy. But he's dying. But you wouldn't think so. And he's definitely got a sense of purpose, because I asked him this question. He said, well, I don't think I've got one purpose. I think throughout my life I've had several purposes. And I agree with that, because it may change from time to time, and that's okay too. So what's my closing message in all this? Do not obsess about it. Don't worry if you don't find a sense of purpose or you don't feel a sense of purpose. It is, in my view, age-related, unless you've got life experience of at least, 10, 15 years, 20 years of actually being an adult in an adult world, doing adult stuff, then that's how you build a sense of experience and possibly purpose out of that. But you don't come out of college or university with a sense of purpose. You might have a sense of mission, you might have a passion, you might be evangelistic about that, you might want to spread the word. But is that your purpose? Will it carry you through 50, 60, 70, 80 years of life, feeling that you are fulfilled? And finally, as I said, I know purpose can change. Mine has certainly changed. But deep down, my values never have. And I think I've learned that actually, if I look back through my life, the thread that runs through it, I was always driven by the same values. And if I wanted to package them up, I could probably say they kind of gave me a sense of purpose. But it didn't become a conscious mission until, I would say, 20, 25 years ago, max. Very late in life did I develop a sense of purpose. I would say that it even felt a little bit arrogant to say that I had a purpose in the field that I work in. I work with people to help them improve their lives in some way. You could call that a sense of purpose. To me, that sounds a little bit arrogant, I have to say. My sense of purpose really is to spread the word. It might be my word, it might be somebody else's word. But whatever it is to put information out there that helps people live a better life. And that is so simple, really, the idea, the concept. I was going to say it's easy, but of course it isn't easy to live a good life. And as I started to say a few minutes ago, it's not easy finding your sense of purpose. It will lead you sometimes to contradict others, to disagree, to choose your friends wisely and have to abandon some people, even to change a relationship. It's a powerful thing if you really do know yourself enough to have a sense of purpose. And it certainly isn't something that sits well with doing just whatever you want. Because if you're honest with yourself, if you're authentic, your values won't let you do things that don't fit with your values. So I count myself an honest person. Every honest person is dishonest at time to time. It's just a question of degree. We kid ourselves if we say we're never dishonest. We all tell little lies from time to time, or we all make mistakes or cover something up when we've made a mistake. Don't pretend you don't, because we all do it. Let's be honest about that, and that's the first step in knowing yourself, surely. But it's a question of degree, and do these errors harm anybody? If we create a problem somewhere. Do we put it right? Do we own up to it? Do we take responsibility? These are all value-driven decisions through our lives, which can get in the way of your sense of purpose. Doing what's right isn't necessarily doing what's best for you all the time. That's a bugbear. It's not a very nice thing to have to live with some days, because sometimes you have to do things that are in somebody else's interest and not your own. And that can fit in with a sense of purpose, but it's more value-driven than anything else. So moving along, in this episode, I've talked about a sense of purpose. I've wandered about a bit, as I did in my early life, but I hope I've given you some food for thought. That's really all I can do. I can't advise you on finding a sense of purpose, but I hope I've given you some thinking points. Find your values, understand what they are, find things that you love to do that are congruent with your values, that fit in with your values, that don't offend them, because longer term, that does you harm. Ensure that if you're thinking about purpose, you should be thinking about those things you love, why you do them, how you do them, how they express themselves in life. If, for example, you think you're a compassionate person, how does that express itself out there in the real world? And how does your purpose or your move towards your purpose benefit others? And by the way, if you have a doubt about benefiting others, and I don't just mean doing voluntary work or something like that, it can be in the small things like being respectful, cheering other people up, giving a smile when you really sometimes don't feel like it, being strong in a situation where somebody else needs your support. These can all build into a sense of purpose. But can you say what your purpose is just like that? I think that's a fool's errand, and I think it causes a lot of anguish, worry, and even anxiety. And now, I don't know if you can see, but my dog is joining in with me here. She just thinks she needs to be, there you go. So she's telling me I've spoken enough. So if you're watching this on video, of course, this may be going out on the podcast. You won't have seen my lovely studio dog.
We apologise for this break in transmission.
Okay, after that little interruption, I'm back. So please support me by signing up if you can. If you think this has been useful, send me a thumbs up, give me some other way of acknowledging to me that this has been useful. All the best. This has been Get a Better Handle on Life with me, Barry Winbolt. See you next time. Goodbye.